Hello and welcome to Assembly Debates, the show where we bring you legislative matters and issues pertinent to different states and their people, how they are debated in legislative assemblies, and the impact these legislations and policies have on people. I'm Teena. Today we will talk about population policy, an issue discussed widely in recent months. World Population Day this year saw Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath unveil Population Policy 2021 to 2030 for Uttar Pradesh. In order to control population growth in the most populous state, the policy targets two things: aligning the state's reproductive rate to its development goals and reducing the reproductive rate from the current 2.7% to 2.1% by 2026 and to 1.9% by 2030. To achieve this, the policy promotes a two-child norm with benefits for couples who adhere to it. On the other hand, those who do not will be disadvantaged. They won't be able to contest local body elections, and they also cannot apply for government jobs or avail government subsidy. The state government says the new policy will not just check population growth, but also make development sustainable by distributing resources equitably. The Yogi government's decision in UP opened a nationwide debate on whether India needs a population policy. And despite conflicting views, more and more states are considering a similar population policy. At least 4 states, Assam, Uttarakhand, Gujarat and Karnataka, are debating the merits and demerits of the draft policy of the UP government. Starting with the state in the northeast, Assam is likely to introduce a two-child policy in its budget session next year. Recently, Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma announced that Assam will implement the two-child policy with benefits under specific schemes gradually. But he did assert that members of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities and also tea garden workers will be exempt. Notably, back in 2017, the Assam Assembly had decided to make only couples with 2 or less children eligible for government jobs. Existing government employees were also to follow the same guidelines. This would also apply to panchayat, local body elections and government jobs. Up north, Uttarakhand Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami, in his Independence Day address, announced a committee to implement a law on population control. He said climate change was the reason for this decision. The western state of Gujarat is also discussing the pros and cons of the population control bill proposed in Uttar Pradesh. Experts are being consulted and views from the public are also being considered. Interestingly, Gujarat has a law since 2005 that bars those with more than 2 children from contesting local body elections. The state amended the Gujarat Local Authorities Act to include this provision for aspirants seeking election to panchayats, municipalities and municipal corporations. Similarly, in Karnataka, there are demands from leaders of the ruling party to bring in a law to control population growth. Soon after the UP government's move, BJP National Secretary C.T. Ravi, who belongs to Karnataka, sought a similar policy in the state. He said, currently ranked 8th in the country, Karnataka has a population of nearly 6.5 crore, but this number will soon cross 7 crore and burden the state's resources. Interestingly, even before the draft population policy of the UP government triggered a demand for a similar law in other states, at least a dozen other states were following a two-child norm for certain government jobs and elected posts. Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Uttarakhand, Karnataka, Odisha. In Rajasthan, those who have more than 2 children are not eligible for government jobs. The Rajasthan Panchayati Raj Act of 1994 disqualifies people with more than 2 children from contesting elections as a panch or even a member. The rule is not applicable in case of a child with disability. Over the years, the policy has been amended several times. In 2001, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh implemented the two-child policy for both government jobs and also local body elections. However, in 2005, both states discontinued it for elections when it was pointed out that such a rule was not applicable in assembly and parliamentary elections. The policy, however, continues for government jobs and also judicial services. Under the Panchayati Raj laws in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, if a person had more than 2 children before the 30th of May 1994, they will be disentitled from contesting elections. Maharashtra also has a 2-child policy for the last 21 years. The Maharashtra Zilla Parishads and Panchayat Samitis Act disqualifies people with more than 2 children from contesting local body elections, which is the Gram Panchayats and municipal corporations. The Maharashtra Civil Services Declaration of Small Family Rules 2005 states that a person with more than 2 children is disqualified from holding a post in the state government. Women with more than 2 children are also not allowed to benefit from the public distribution system. Odisha disqualifies individuals with more than 2 children from contesting urban local body elections as per the Odisha Zilla Parishad Act that was enacted in 1992. States like Bihar and Uttarakhand also implemented the 2-child policy in various spheres, but currently it is limited to municipal elections. Karnataka has a unique stand on population control. The Karnataka Gram Swaraj and Panchayat Raj Act 1993 does not bar individuals with more than 2 children from contesting elections to local bodies. It, however, renders people ineligible to contest if they do not have a sanitary latrine for the use of family members. So be it in local elections, government jobs or judicial services, the 2-child norm is being followed by several states for decades. And broadly, the provisions are the same in every state. The need for a population control law has also been raised in Parliament. Private members' bills have been introduced in both houses by members of Parliament who have cited population growth as the biggest hurdle in India's development. However, the question is, does India need a law to check population growth? What do experts and the analysts of population studies say about India? Will a stringent law facilitate optimum distribution of resources, or will it lead to a demographic distortion? And that's one concern which is often raised about population control measures. To discuss all of that, we have with us on the show today 2 eminent personalities joining us virtually. Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, he's a 3rd-term sitting member of Parliament, also an eminent jurist, former chairperson of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Law and Justice, senior national spokesperson of the Congress Party, and former additional Solicitor General of India. And we're also joined by Poonam Muttrrja. She's Executive Director, Population Foundation of India. I welcome both our guests on Sansad TV. Dr. Singhvi, let me begin the program with you. Although the current context at the moment is that various states have been discussing and announcing population control measures, the need for a national population policy is also often talked about. The issue has also been raised in Parliament several times. You yourself have introduced a private member's bill on population control. What are the points that you have raised in the bill, and why do you think India needs a population control policy?
Let me start with a few general comments. You see, generally not allowing any country with relatively limited landmass to have exploding or runaway population growth. So in that sense, population control, the word control in that sense, I think is axiomatic. Nobody can object to it because it's like mother's milk. It is by definition good. However, when you started the program, you said about what is the best way. So despite having moved a bill or spoken about it, let me make it clear at the outset, there is nothing better for population control than the gradualist, less tangible measures. The coercive, more tangible are always less effective. Not that they are irrelevant. So by less tangible and more effective, I mean women's education. That single thing will control it like nothing else. 2, an increased, enhanced standard of living. 3, I'm just giving an example, this list could be very long. Availability at easy manner, easy prices of contraception methods, etc., etc. But having said that, and this is an eternal debate between what I call the gradualists and the accelerators. The gradualists, and I'm not dogmatic at all, although I moved a bill, I believe very much in the gradualist approach. Having said that, now you asked me the question about my bill. Well, it's, I think, more a declaration of intent than the nitty-gritty. The nitty-gritty can be changed. It can be added or minused. It's in that sense, a vanilla bill. Basically, two parts. Part one is those who want to come down to a one child. No. Now, I agree it's a little drastic in the Indian context, but it is an optional thing in the bill. They get some additional enhanced, what I may call the carrot policy, admissions, subsidies, government jobs for that sole child when he grows up beyond 18, etc., etc. So that is part one. The other is equally some amount of stick for those who exceed the two number. So, you will have effect on your government jobs, either parent. You will have effect on your contests in panchayat upwards, state upwards, parliamentary electoral contests. You will have disincentives for government subsidy and so on and so forth. So that's the broad structure of the bill. Of course, it has other hortatory and exhortatory measures like, make available contraception in this manner, that manner. It says you have a national population stabilization fund. It says you have a population policy, etc. But let me end this opening with saying that ultimately, this is more a declaration of intent. Somebody will want to add 2 points. Somebody will want to minus 2 points. I'm not dogmatic at all. I think the real thing is not to let go of the gradualist measures also. So it has to be a mix and match. And there has to be, of course, a policy and possibly a certain degree of push and coercion. I'll not call it coercion. I'll call it carrot and stick. Some
Okay,
amount
so
of stick, some
let me take that view to Poonam Muttrrja. I've seen several of your interviews. You certainly don't believe in this carrot and stick policy because you think India does not need a law of that kind. Why do you think so? Because looking at how the population has been expanding in our country, just a little over 2% of the landmass and nearly 20% of the world population. And at this rate, we are, of course, going to overtake China in terms of being the world's most populated country. So why not have a law that can check this population?
So I first want to welcome Mr. Singhvi Dr. Singhvi becoming a champion of population issues. And I very much hope, Dr. Singhvi, that we will have an opportunity to interact with you and seek your guidance. And I do agree with you. We need more than gradual measures. And let me explain why we need more than gradual measures, but for a slightly different reason. One, India has an unmet need for family planning. And there is nothing I'm going to say that Dr. Singhvi doesn't know. It is more for our audience. 13% of the population increase in India is unmet need due to unmet need for family planning. And allow me to explain that for those who are our viewers or listeners. And that is that there is women and families wish to have fewer children, but because they don't have access to family planning services, more than that, worse still, there are a large number of women who do not have the autonomy to exercise the number of children they want, even if they want only 2 children, or if they want to postpone the first child, if they're married young, or they want spacing between 2 children. It is the mother-in-law, and often I would like to say the irresponsible partner husband who thinks it's a woman's responsibility to not only have children, which I believe is a privilege for women to have children. Second, it is their responsibility to seek family planning without giving them the agency, permission, and so on. And then, of course, there's the poor government system. So in a situation like this, why not first meet the unmet need of family planning for women? And these women are mainly uneducated, illiterate, poor, and living in remote parts of India, are tribals, are Dalits, are from different minority communities. Third, I would like to say that in India, there is enough data. We have some of the most robust and good data from NFHS, from SRS, and from census, which is all government data. And I respect the data in these 3 data sets, and there is no manufacturing of data yet in these 3 data sets. So this shows that women do not wish to have more than one, or families do not actually wish to have, and it is the interviews are with women, more than 1.8 children, which is less than 2 children. In a situation like this, and in a country where 70% of our population is young and at a reproductive age, they need spacing methods. So this bill links it to, in any case, sterilization, some of the incentives. So I want to come to that later. That, as Mr. Singhvi said, can be changed. So I know that Mr. Singhvi is a reasonable person. So I'm not going to fight with three small issues here. But it is on the whole, the intention of Mr. Singhvi is good. The intention of those who are coming out with the two-child norm, others in this country, their intention is not based on any data, and the kind of coercive measures that they are bringing in are anti-women, anti-poor. And if women, once you provide family planning services to all women, and then you come out with all the measures that Dr. Singhvi is suggesting, I will not oppose it. I oppose the two-child bill without women having access. Education will take a long time, I agree. So while that's the best contraceptive pill, education, but let's do in the meantime, because country needs to stabilize more than anything else. Women are desperate. And I want to end with one data to oppose my view on two-child norm, which is that 75% of the women get sterilized, while only 0.3% of the men get sterilized. And while I am against penalizing even the men, but we have to find creative ways of getting men to take more responsibility. And last, of the 75% women who get sterilization, 77% of the women experience family planning for the first time in their life when they go through sterilization. What have they been doing in the meantime to control or regulate their fertility? They have been having multiple abortions. It is a tragedy for India that instead of providing family planning services for our women, we throw them to the back alleys and dogs, if I may say so. There are 16.4 million abortions in India every year, as per the 2015 government data. And why are these abortions? Not because people are having, young teenagers are having irresponsible sex. It is because women do not have the agency. They go and hide. 44% of the abortions are women hide from their families and have to regulate their fertility. And of these 44% women, total 90% of the abortions are done by unsafe practitioners, not even doctors. And 8% women die due to abortions. And for every woman who dies, 20% women are living with morbidities of the kind which is like living a dying.
Okay, so let me get in a perspective from Dr. Singhvi on the concerns that are being raised by Poonam Muttrrja and also the other population experts who fear that such policies, when we go for one-child or two-child policies in a country like ours, it could lead to sex-selective abortions. As it is, the abortion rate, as you've pointed out, is very, very high in our country. Dr. Singhvi, so when we talk about the carrot approach, it is a welcome step. But when we talk about the stick approach, could it backfire? Especially, could it be discriminatory to women? Because family planning, the onus of family planning in our country is largely on women. Can it be discriminatory towards them? Will we further be alienating them by bringing such policies?
Teena, if you recollect, when you approached me for the program, I said briefly that you will find a greater degree of convergence for a middle-of-the-road path which I adopt, and not the usual two extreme views which naturally panel hosts love to have, because that really enhances the spice in your program. I believe very strongly on population, that Aristotle's phrase that virtue is usually the mean between two extremes, each of which is a vice. So my points on this is very middle of the road. Number one, I have highlighted in my addresses, and would also be doing so in case the population issue comes up in the RajyaSabha, that there are scourges of this thing which have to be kept in mind. And this has to be very strong regulatory control. As you know, scourges include girl infanticide. Certainly, it's something in India you can't ignore. Child marriages, for another extreme kind of a thing, forced sterilizations or other coercive steps. Now, that is something which has to be done by a policing system, definitely in a much better way. Secondly, I am aware that somewhere around the line, I don't know the exact year, maybe we've already reached the replacement level, or maybe we'll reach the replacement level in a year or two, so that the population then hopefully would not be a net increase. But having said that, I thought that it should be really an intelligent, non-coercive mix and match of policy measures. First and foremost has to be the infrastructure on contraception. Nirod, for all its infirmities, did propagate the ethos, the culture. That has to be expanded exponentially because people have to be, not feel inhibited or shamed about talking about contraception. I've read about some interesting programs in Thailand, etc., where it is almost a kind of a joke amongst family members to talk of contraception, which brings it to center table and increase awareness. Obviously, in the Indian cultural system, there is a problem, but these kind of innovative programs we should pick up and create that awareness. This contraception is just like brushing your teeth as a necessity, and you will have available the infrastructure to deal with it. So there I clearly have, in fact, put it in my bill also. I'm only saying that maybe not, and frankly, I'm not quite at all in favor of the one child option, which I've given in my bill. I think it's only a pure voluntary option. One child is too little in the Indian context, especially this great obsession with the male child. So what I think is there should be a certain degree of a mix and match intelligent policy to create awareness from the other end also. Some carrot and stick that, yes, you are aware contraception is available, but look, if you make that little extra effort for a two-child norm, you will get this small little push, be it in admissions, be it in... Now, if you... Obviously, it has to have many things coming together. It has to have a policing coming together. It has to have the availability of contraception. And above all, it has to have this intrusive bedroom conversations with rural women about contraception. I put it as bluntly as that. But having said that, some degree of a policy mix would not be a bad idea. That's what I mean by a gradualist approach.
Okay. Poonam ji, but the idea that, has come about and the chorus is only growing among states, one after the other, we are hearing ever since UP came up with the draft policy, every state wants to discuss, debate, talk about it, implement it in the times to come. But there have been at least a dozen states who have already been following such a policy since the 1990s. What has their experience been?
12 states had a two-child bill, which was only for panchayat level. And actually, I welcome the fact that Dr. Singhvi is also talking about RajyaSabha and Lok Sabha. At least he's not discriminating against the poor and the people who are just, and the sort of small players in the political field, which is the panchayats compared to RajyaSabha and Lok Sabha. So there should be equality if there is a bill, which again, as I said, I don't agree with, but I want to say that the experience was, and Dr. Singhvi mentioned it himself, that in India, where there is a son preference, there is skewed sex ratios, and in Haryana and Punjab especially, when they did the two-child bill for panchayats, the number of sex-selective abortions and sex ratios declined. There is a study by Miss Nirmala Butt, who used to be a very senior bureaucrat in Madhya Pradesh cadre. She did a study on the impact of the two-child norm. And, Dr. Singhvi, I wanted to mention to you, not only was there skewed sex ratio, but men divorced wives on paper so that they could continue being elected members of parliament, and people gave up their children for adoption. It is a very cruel reflection of our society. And in India, China gave up on a one-child policy, then they started two-child policy, now they've given up two-child policy because of two reasons. One is sex ratios, and they only have son preference. In India, my experience is we not only have son preference, that many of us in our country, people have daughter aversion. For whatever reasons, dowry, poverty, a range of reasons, inexplicable, unacceptable, but this is a reality. Second, China also gave up on on the two-child norm and has now opened up its policy because there were people, there's a huge, there is a population which is not sustainable. You have large number of old people who are dependent, smaller number of young people. In India, there at least they have health systems and social security. In India, we have no social security. What will happen to the aging population who will not have young people looking after them? And I worry about the policing and control given under the socio-political circumstances in India.
What is the best way ahead in the times to come for our country?
Let me make a few quick points. In a lighter vein, of course, when I moved this bill is almost 2.5 years ago, more as a a structure rather than the nitty-gritty. It always becomes political. It was fast-tracked and listed without even my knowledge as the fastest matter of a private member's bill listed. And but for COVID, it would have been taken up while many private member bills of earlier lineage were languishing. So that's the lighter vein. Zigzags have happened, which is why I favor the gradualist approach and a mix and match policy. Zigzags have happened globally. Many countries have moderated their population control initiatives. Many countries have given it up, like China. In India also, 4 states out of those 12 apparently have zigzagged again and have withdrawn, etc. So I think you need to hasten slowly. But the most important of these 4 points is you have to build up the trust deficit, rather remove the trust deficit and build up the trust.
Absolutely. I think it's essential for us to have a carrot and stick approach if people have been citing that we need to control population. At the same time, what's also important is that we need to strengthen a combination of factors like better education to women, giving them better employment opportunities so that they are the ones who can decide for themselves on contraception, on birth control, and also giving them better access to agencies of contraception. So these are vital aspects that have been pointed out by several population experts, by Poonam Muttrrja on our program as well. So if we work towards a combination of these factors, population will stabilize in our country. And as data suggests, the fertility rate is already stabilizing. So in the decades to come, population control will be something that we won't need a law for, and changes in society will bring the difference that we are aiming to make. So with that, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of Assembly Debates. Thank you to both my guests for joining me on the program and sharing your perspective with us and our viewers. Pleasure having you on the show. So that's it from us on Assembly Debates. See you again next time. Thank you very much for your time.